Hi, everybody. This is Joseph Rosales from Business in the New Normal. Thank you for joining us today. This is my co-host, Ike Devji. How are you, Ike?
Good to be with you.
Good, good. It seems like it's been a while since we've talked, even though it's only been 2 weeks. We took the last week off, and we have a guest today, Dawnyel Smink, and she's going to be joining us in a second. But to get started, Ike, what's been going on in your world? You're an asset protection attorney. You work with clients all over the country, and you've seen some a lot of changes in the past year. And what's going on so far in 2021?
Well, right now, what's top of mind for many people right now is taxes. Whether they're getting prepared to file their taxes or whether they are watching the news and hearing about potential tax changes that nobody has nailed down for sure yet and prematurely panicking about that or simply asking smart questions about what they should be doing. Another tax issue that's happening right now is people are discovering that certain things they did for tax benefits may not be effective or in some cases legal. So we're seeing lots of folks in a panic situation right now, particularly those who have invested in things like captive insurance companies, conservation easements, and in some cases even opportunity zones that were not actually qualified properties, looking at trying to decide if they're going to take those deductions or not, or what they need to do proactively to not come into harm's way. So that really is taking up a great deal of bandwidth right now, sort of from business owners. They have all these different tax issues. And of course, we are entering tax paralysis season, where everybody who has business to do suddenly says, I can't do anything till after the 15th. I can't think about anything else till after the 15th. Meanwhile, business carries on, risks carry on, other things need to be addressed. So we just try and warn people, hey, taxes are important. Tax planning is an important part of wealth preservation, but don't put everything else aside. So how about you, Joseph? I know you've got many things going on. You've got the exciting rollout of the book continuing, The Leader of You. You've got the course rolling out, and then the other exciting things you're doing. What are your clients that you're consulting with? What's on their mind? What's making them happy? What's scaring them right now?
Well, it's interesting because and thank you for the plug on the book. We definitely have seen a lot of traction there. The title of The Leader of You sort of describes what the book is about. It's about becoming a more effective leader of self so you can be a more effective leader of others.
Start to become an even more effective leader immediately. Get your copy of The Leader of You at theleaderofyou.com.
And as you said, the course should be out. We've had a couple of delays on some things, but the 6-week digital course will be out probably in a month. But the idea of leadership has become so much even more pronounced now that people struggle to find a direction. And so what they do is they just keep churning over the same things in their business. They don't go out and create new things because they're just trying to tread water in some cases, and they're just trying to do what they did before and hope that it works again. And leadership is not just about leading people, it's about discovering new avenues. It's about taking direction in your business and helping people to join in that vision, to join in that direction, to help gain traction and move forward. Because if you're not moving forward, you're staying still. And if you're staying still, you're probably sliding backwards because the world keeps going. And so when we started this program several months ago, Business in the New Normal, it was to explore with people what is going on around them, not just in their industry, but elsewhere, globally, regionally, and certainly in their own community, and to discover ways that they can not just survive, but thrive. And to thrive, you need to move forward. And to thrive really well, you need good leadership. And I know our guest is a leader in her own business, and she's done some amazing things. And when we had an interview with her about a month ago, I was so impressed. You got to come on the show, because we need people who are not just us, not just an attorney and a business consultant, coach, but people that are doing it in other avenues. And insurance is one that affects everyone. You have it or you have it, basically, and most people have it. And you know, it's a lot of choices around there. I'm gonna introduce her in a second here, but you know, my clients continue to struggle with direction, and I think that's where when footing gets uneven, people, it's almost like trying to dance or to work or play a game on ice. You know, it's hard to get your traction, and so that's where leadership, I think, can help. So if people are interested in, they can go to leaderofyou.com and buy it and look at the other things that we're doing. But I want to get to our guest now, and Dawnyel Smink is the president of Canyonlands Insurance, and she's pretty interesting. She's got a background as an elementary school teacher, and she uses that background to help challenge her clients and their agencies, which I think you have over 40 agencies in your group. And she helps them to focus on what matters most, like protecting families and their business and assets from the unexpected. So Dawnyel and Ike have that in common because they're about protecting people's assets. And to support that mission, she plays a big part in her company, creating new technology-driven processes, coming up with new ways to improve the insurance industry, and developing strategies for individuals and businesses. And away from work, and I was really impressed with this too, because I'm a golfer, she's played golf all over the world. And literally from the old course at St. Andrews to Playa Grande in the Dominican Republic, and loves those challenges that helps her take her game to the next level. So Dawnyel, sorry, Dawnyel, it's hard for me to pronounce it sometimes. Welcome to Business in the New Normal. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on your show. And I was really impressed with this podcast and your book, and excited to have a conversation with you guys today.
Hey, thanks. Well, you know, it is just a conversation. It's you sharing some ideas and some perspectives with us. And I guess what I'd like to start off with is tell us about who is Canyonlands Insurance?
Yeah, thanks. We are an insurance group. We get classified as a network agency, an aggregator, a cluster. For us, it's really, our goal is to keep independent agencies independent. We've actually grown in the last couple of months, so I need to update my LinkedIn to almost 60 locations nationally.
Wow.
And so I have my own agency location as well. And I think that keeps me really tied in with our agencies that we serve. When you own a business, whether it's an insurance agency or if you own any other type of business, as a business owner, a lot of times we feel very alone. We feel like we're on an island, and we're not always having somebody that's accountable to us, or we're not accountable to them. And so the problem is that you need resources, but sometimes you don't know which resources that you should use. So a lot of people suffer from entrepreneurial ADD. So we test out a lot of those resources for them. We show them how they actually work. And then we do a lot of coaching / therapy with our agencies on implementation and giving them the leverage of the group, but also the resources for, like you had mentioned, technology or concepts and procedures. So a lot of agencies or businesses do not have their foundation as a business built. And so that's sometimes we have agencies that come in and they're already established, and we teach them how to create that foundation so then they can build their agency at a bigger level than they ever have before.
That's so foundationally important what you just said, because a business, whether they sell insurance or any other product or service, they need systems, they need processes, and people look at systems as connecting the dots. And it really is that simple. What are the dots? How are they laid out? And how do you connect them? I use an example of connecting the dots. Like if I wanted, I'm not an artist, by the way, but if I wanted to draw an elephant and somebody could lay out the dots for me, I can connect the dots and come out with the perfect elephant. How I color it, how I shade it, that's a personal character thing. But the dots have to be connected, right? And so many people in business, insurance, financial services, any professional service business, law firms, often they struggle with the process and they expect people to produce the result when really it's the system that produces the result, the processes that produce the result, and the people bring life to the system and process. So yeah, and I love what you're doing, and I can imagine with 40 now 60 agencies connected, there's a lot of different ways that people try and do their business, right?
Absolutely. And every business owner is in a different part of their, career too. And I think it's always important to respect where people are at. I mean, some people are just starting off on their path of their career, and then some people are perpetuating their agencies or retiring. So I think that's always still really important to, as a leader, to recognize where people are at, not where you're at. I totally failed at that in the beginning of, taking on the responsibility as a group. When I took ownership in 2008, I was like, oh, they're all going to want to grow. They're all going to want to do this. And that's your own ego getting in the way there. And you're not respecting where people are at in the life cycle of their career.
Yeah.
So I've worked really hard to go step back and go, if I was in their shoes, what would I want someone to help me with? And what would I want somebody to listen to and be mindful of?
Yeah. That's a great perspective.
What are some of the challenges that people in industry as independent insurance agents have faced over the last year? Every business has experienced this crisis differently. You folks are in a business where the certain product that you provide is indispensable to many of us. It's indispensable to businesses to be insured. It's indispensable to individuals to be insured. But at the same time, there was a whole bunch of economic duress where businesses didn't have any cash flow. The people who worked for those businesses didn't have any money. So what are some of the things that your industry went through? And can you give us sort of the view from the insurance chair?
Yeah, definitely. Everything changed. Everything for us, because we insure businesses. So we were in all facets of every type of industry that was doing. Some of our businesses that we were working with were doing really well. And then some of them were just trying to survive. We have a national theater chain that we insure, and no one's going to the theaters anymore. So I think every agency took a little bit of a different approach, at the ground level with their clients. For us, we were super proactive. We called them, we created a COVID-19 page for them with resources, and we got ahead of it and said, hey, here's some of your options. And then the crazy thing is I would probably get about 40 emails a day from carriers on their response to COVID. That's a lot of stuff. And they're like, hey, we're going to take late payments. We're going to be doing, this for these type of clients. There was a lot of information coming at us at once. So we created a portal for our agencies talking about what were the big things that came, for the week, and a roundup from all of the carriers to try and help disseminate that. So imagine that your whole industry changes overnight. From billing side of it to coverage side of it, we had carriers that were, adding coverage, for example, like restaurants. They were allowing for delivery where they had normally would not add for delivery for that type of class. Wow. Because of what was going on in COVID, because the restaurants had to pivot and then change their mode of operation. So we were seeing from all sides of it. We had carriers that allowed us to reduce, exposures without reducing coverage for the clients so that they could make the bills every month. So that was very different. And then we were all going, virtual. Like all of our people were telecommuting at that time. I feel very fortunate we were prepared for that. We were at the end of 2019, we were doing construction on a new building and consolidating 3 different locations. And so we had already figured out how to work virtually, and we have virtual assistants too. So we were prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was my building finished in March, 2 days before I sent everyone home. So there's nothing like buying a building, working on it for nearly a year, and then going, okay, guys, we're not going to go move. We're going to go home, and sending them home. But I felt really fortunate that we were able to do our jobs from home. And a lot of the industry was able to do their jobs from home. So that was a big part of it. Business interruption became an instant conversation. because that is not a risk that the industry, wants to be on in regards to pandemics. And so that was difficult conversations with our clients, telling them like that coverage is not like typically standard. There was limited policies out there before this. So now the industry is responding and figuring out, do we want to cover this for the future? And how would that look? It's a lot like terrorism coverage, which actually 90% of people that I've insured reject it. That came about because of 9/11. And so that coverage wasn't something that was standardly offered to businesses. So now it's like, should this be something that we offer? And I think there was a lot of frustration from business owners and the nation, because this wasn't a coverage that was built in there. But I think people forget that insurance is about risk transfer, not risk complete avoidance. And even given the option, as the example of terrorism, people will still reject the coverage, and then they'll come back, and if something happens like a 9/11, they're going to be upset that they don't have it, but they have that option. So now we're looking at trying to figure out how to create that option, but still not take on too much risk, because it would completely bankrupt the entire industry. So there is that weird conversation of the risk tolerance of the whole industry as a whole in regards to taking on business income.
That's interesting, because I have this conversation with many of my clients, many of whom are business owners who either own commercial real estate, so they own facilities that are open to the public. Could be shopping centers, retail, office, hotel, multifamily housing, student housing, and I've advised all of them for a number of years to include active shooter coverage in their insurance policies. And the only ones who are willing to have that conversation are the ones who've actually experienced acts of properties. And everybody else pretends that it doesn't apply to them, or doesn't want to manage that risk as if somehow they think it's predictable, which is, something interesting about that. So I can relate to that. The other thing I relate to is you saying that you finished your building 2 days before quarantine started and we all went home and changed everything. And so that brings up another interesting issue. I know that unoccupied structures, both commercial and residential, have different treatment from insurance companies, right? If a structure is unoccupied for 30 or 60 or 90 days, different things come in, coverage get reduced, insurance coverage rates go up, things like that. So how did you have to make those adjustments with all these business owners who went dark for up to a year, and how the properties themselves were insured? And I know this is kind of a detailed question, but since so many of the people who watch this podcast are business owners, I think it might be interesting to them if you could shed a little light on that, some of the risks of an unoccupied business.
Yeah, it was really dependent on the carriers. Some carriers were completely flexible, and that's what I was saying. They were changing coverage, where like there would be an exclusion for vacancy, that coverage would not apply, or they'd have to cancel that policy and rewrite it typically. But with COVID, some of the carriers gave an extension on the vacancy clause. And so that was just written into, what they were doing. And so we were trying to get a handle on it, because some carriers were doing it and some were not. So definitely check, if you have a building that's still vacant today, a year later, is definitely check with your insurance carrier and your agency and make sure that how that's being applied today, because it's not across the board 100%. I mean, we had to they gave back refunds to our clients. So we were inundated with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls more a day, just from the question of how am I getting a refund from my carrier in regards to, the COVID relief that they were giving. And it was confusing. Some of them were giving a percentage, some of them were giving a flat amount. I mean, I've never had that experience of like, we had to create cheat sheets, because it was just too much information to try and figure out how to relay it, because they weren't doing the same thing. So I would definitely get the advice from your insurance carrier and agency on the vacancy side of it, because it's going to differ.
And how should they get that advice? Do they get, my advice is always to get everything in writing and never take any representation insurance coverage over a phone call. Do you agree with that? And how formal does that need to be to protect the business owner?
Yeah, I would ask them to get it definitely in writing, have it sent through an email, and if the carrier, and also ask if the carrier has specific policy language that they have added to the policy, to get a copy of that policy language.
Wow. Yeah, I wrote down communication and how important it is. Oh my gosh. I mean, because of what you don't know can hurt you in this case. And it will. And it's interesting because as people scramble, agencies scramble to try and build their book because things have changed. And I can imagine all these refunds coming, requests coming at people. People tend to sort of just lock down and not communicate, and that's the worst thing they can do, because their clients need to know what's going on. And the more proactive you are in that management of that communication, the fewer calls you're probably going to get incoming. Imagine if people don't respond and they don't be proactive, they're going to have massive numbers of calls, and then it's a reactive thing instead of a proactive thing. And clients remember when you took care of them during this stressful time, or whether you ignored them. And that's what people do. They sometimes just ignore. I don't want to give a refund, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to deal with that. I don't know what to do. There's too many people calling, and all of a sudden they just compress. So kudos to you for being super proactive about that and creating some technologies, and you call them cheat sheets, but here's all the things that we need to do. Here's what this provider said about this, and people don't have to get back to people. They can give them an answer right then. That's because that's what people want. They make a call. They want an answer right now. Yeah. So good job on that.
It changed our business. I mean, we allotted a full-time person to just like, what is our COVID response? I mean, that wasn't a position that like going into 2020, I'm like, we should definitely budget for that. We took one of our marketing people, and we said, hey, this is what we'd like to do during this time period. And then we also put, especially our commercial team, we put them on the phones. They had their book of clients that they work with, and we had them directly call them, I mean, really early. I'm talking about the week we went home. That was the first thing I asked them to do, was just call them, go through it. People want, during this time, they want somebody to give them confidence that something is going in a good direction for them, especially during times of, a pandemic. Especially for a business where you're unsure, they want somebody that can be a resource, that you can be strong with them. So I think that was like, it was interesting because I was flying home from Hawaii for spring break with my kids on the Sunday before I sent everybody home, when everything went down to lockdown. I was watching from Hawaii going, what is going on with toilet paper? What is going on? What am I coming home to? Because Hawaii, you couldn't see anything different. But in the airport, it became very real to me that we need to pivot really fast. And that was like, I had an email from my kids' school that they weren't going to be going to school for the next 2 weeks. And, and I knew we had team members that had kids too. So I just made a really quick decision and said, guys, we're going to be okay. And we're going to get through this. And we need to have more people that are willing to go, it's scary, but I'm going to stand up and be there for you guys. I'm going to be a resource, whether it's our clients or whether it was my team and our agencies. This is what we decided to do from the get-go. And trust me, it was not my first choice to go, I think I want to homeschool my kids and not move into my new building. Like, this was not like, the thing I wanted to do, but we need to know our place of what we need to do for the people that we serve.
Great leadership. I mean, that's what I got out of what you just said. Great choices, good decisions, but it was leadership. You had to do something, and your people were relying on you to make choices and help give direction. And so good job on that. So what are some of the mistakes you see people making? And it could be just some of the opposite of what you just said, but what are some of the mistakes you see some of your clients making that they've come to you and said, gee, what do I do? I mean, I'm stuck, or I'm struggling here.
Yeah, I was telling you that I labeled the 2020 before COVID as pivot with purpose and positivity, because we already knew we were going to do a move. We also knew that we were going to do some really big things we had never done before. And during this, we saw businesses that pivoted really well. Everyone's like, oh, the restaurant industry is doing horrible. Actually, there was a lot of restaurants that did really well during this.
Yeah.
And they even did better than they thought they were going to, but they pivoted to delivery. You know, they pivoted to, you know, more takeout menu, a limited menu to make it easier for the staff. And they did, and they made those changes. And then there was companies that I feel like they were already struggling before this, and they gave up. They gave it as an excuse. Well, my business didn't work because of COVID. And I'm like, 6 months before, I could have told you your business wasn't going to work out.
Yeah.
Like, you weren't doing the things as a business owner that you needed to do. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is that I always feel like you can't use something as an excuse of whether you have succeeded or you have not succeeded. It is up to you to pivot to do the things you need to do to make it work. There's things going to knock you down. You're going to get knocked down, but you got to figure out how to get yourself back up. And some people didn't do it very well, but some people did it really well.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had many of those people as guests on our show that have just figured out. I mean, imagine being in the live event industry. Your business was live events. I mean, if that isn't a stop like I've not seen before, but then those people just boom, they pivoted to personal protection. They pivoted to something else, and they've skyrocketed. Now, when live events start to come back, they're in an even stronger position than they were before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's there. And so, yeah, we've got so many of those stories, and thank you for sharing some of those. So going forward, everybody believes that we're coming through this pandemic. The vaccines are available. Variants seem to be under some sort of control. We're seeing some spikes right now in Europe with some new things coming. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I feel like we're coming through this. I feel real positive. Again, my business has been continued super busy. Ike's been crazy busy. Ike's in Scottsdale. Are you in Tempe?
I am.
You're in Tempe, so we're all in Arizona. The economy's continued to grow in many sectors. But so I've said it many times, and it's not popular with some people. This is this COVID-19 experience has been a great learning curve if we take it that way. We need to learn how to continue to manage and grow our businesses, regardless of what it is, what your business is. We need to understand how to manage and grow in times of crisis like this, because I don't know when the next one's going to come. There's a movie out that talks about COVID-23, which is, it's just fictional, but it's deadly within 24 hours. Well, guess what? That's a different pandemic than this one. And I don't know what that looks like. It's a movie. But I just say that, if we haven't learned lessons about how to work from home, or how to pivot, or how to transition, or how to lead, then this really was a bad thing. But for those people that have learned and grown and survived and thrived, it's less of a bad thing, if that makes sense, because we've learned from it. So hopefully we've learned from it. What are some of the things that you, in your mind, think that businesses need to do going forward in the structure that we're in now, going forward, to continue to grow their business and regain some traction? What are some of the things that you see?
Yeah, I think that if you had a business in 2008 that was dependent on, residential, I had a book of business that was largely contractors. So I helped contractors go bankrupt and made less money by helping them go bankrupt. And so that taught me a lot, prepared for it, of this thought process, that when there are hard times, there is always an opportunity somewhere within that, right? So then we fast forward to 2020 with COVID. I would sit across, we have a home bar, my husband and I would be talking to him and going, where are the opportunities? Let's not look at where the things are that are going wrong, but we're going to have to, deal with those things, but not focus on them. And I think for the future is that we need to stop focusing on all the things that are going wrong, but where are the opportunities that lie in it? 2008 was one of my best financial years, but one of my hardest. I lost a ton of business, but I was able to gain a whole bunch because I also saw that other, books of business, I could purchase them. That's when I purchased the group that I currently own. And so I was open for those opportunities. And I think that if you have an open mindedness of the things that are opportunities instead of the things that are risk, it goes back to risk management. I mean, maybe that's how I look at everything. I look at my kids that way. Like, if I'm going to invest in them, I'm like, it needs to be a good risk. Like, it needs to make sense. Like, I'm not going to invest in you if it's not a good risk, right? So you got to risk manage your own fear. And you got to risk manage that more into the opportunities than how this is going to negatively impact you. And I think that's the number one thing that leaders need to do and be focused over on that, and then the second thing is that they need to communicate. We talked about it before, but communication is really, really key. If you're failing to communicate, people are going to make assumptions, and those assumptions are going to be based on a narrative that you don't want them to have. And it's going to be often based on what is fear for them.
Yep.
So you'll lose good employees, you'll lose good clients if you're not communicating up front. If you can feel a disconnect with somebody, then you need to lean into that disconnect, even though it's uncomfortable, even if that's something that they have a disconnect from you, and just say, hey, I want to sit down and have a conversation with you. I want to make sure we're always connecting, and let me know what's going on with you. And if you open it up that way to be vulnerable, we're going to need to be more vulnerable too. So this hit us professionally, this hit us personally, COVID did. And we're going to need to really drop the walls and start listening to people in a real connective way. I mean, I didn't want to send everybody home, but I sent them home because I'm like, I got to look at them personally. What are they going to do for their kids? Yeah. There was a personal thing that I could do to make their lives better personally. And I made that decision to do so, even though professionally it was a lot harder.
Yeah.
You've mentioned communication, and that's been a theme throughout our conversation today, and actually on this show in general. It's something that Joseph stresses very heavily, and it's been part of the survival plan of many businesses. I told the business owners that I work with and the places that I write at the beginning of this last year that it was important that they communicate what they were doing, for instance, to keep the staff safe for employee retention. It was important that they communicate to their clients what they were doing to physical facility safe and why it was safe and what measures they were taking and why you didn't need to worry if you were coming in here because we are wearing masks and maintaining distance and limiting capacity, whatever it was they were doing that applies to each business. But you had a bigger responsibility in communicating these things to a large national group of clients, and then of course the people in your network. So let me ask you a real kind of rubber meets the road implementation question. How did you communicate those issues to, first of all, to your clients who were your insurance clients as consumers, and how did you communicate these issues to your network? Did you start something different? Did you create a newsletter? Did you send out regular bulletins? Did you do Zoom conferences? What were some of the specific things you did that allowed you to get your message out and have that communication? Because the communication is we all get it, it's valuable, it's important, but then there's the actualization, right? How do you do it? What specifically did you do? And I'd love to hear from that on how you did that.
Yeah, so we did, every segment we did a little different. Our agencies, we created the COVID-19 tab on our intranet that they're able to do. We have what's called a CLI University. And within that, we had tons of communications, like how to have the conversation. We had a whole podcast on how to communicate with clients about business interruption, like how to have the difficult conversation. They were specific stuff. It wasn't just the communications from the carriers. So we sent that out to them. And then anything that we did for our clients here at corporate, for the businesses or the individuals, we shared those resources with each of our national agencies, so then they could duplicate it. So we put together for individual clients, there's just too many to try and call them individually. Even the commercial ones took for a really long time. It took weeks to call everybody and to make sure, hey, we're reaching out and getting a hold of them. And then we would send a backup email that was a pretty clear message. Here's the website that we have for you guys. Here's the resource page. We want to be proactive on this. If you have any questions on how you want to change your policy, please let us know. So we communicate that from the get-go, and then quarterly we did check-ins with each client that we felt would be impacted. And we picked like classes of clients that were more impacted than others. There were, like, we knew there was classes of clients when we were talking to them that they're like, I'm going to be fine. I'm doing good. But if I'm not fine, I'll let you know. We took them out of the communication, portion, because we, they would contact us and let us know. And then as far as the individual clients, we sent out for them an email marketing campaign, like a newsletter that let them know what was going on, what resources they had for them, and then how discounts were, generally applying, and where they could go get that as well, and refer it back to the website too. And then we did, one of the unique things we did is we did COVID-19 comfort bands for our team, and they were red, green, and yellow, and they displayed, their comfortability of, wearing masks, handshakes, hugs, all that kind of stuff, so they could understand it. And we sent it out to our commercial clients, like the COVID-19 bands, for them to use with their teams. So then they can show that they're caring about their teams too. So marketing took on a whole nother portion of it too, that we were going to communicate in a way that we were looking out for their safety, not just by being proactive, but actually providing them resources to make their teams feel more comfortable too.
I love that idea of the COVID bans. I've not heard of that ever yet. And I'm it's a kind of a unifying thing. It creates a top of mind that, hey, we're aware of this, but it kind of, everybody's got them on, and it's kind of unifying. And as you said early in the program, part of the big challenge is people get isolated. They feel like they're an island unto themselves, and I have to work through this myself, when you don't have to work through this yourself, because there's other people going through it. And how can we share positive and your pivot with purpose and positivity prior to the pandemic is so incredibly relevant to where we are, where we've been, and where we still are, pivoting positively. I want to comment on one more thing, and then we're going to start to tie up, because I want to honor everybody's time. But you said something that I wrote and I circled, and this is just a fact. Challenges create opportunity. You said that clearly. Ike has said it. I've said it. We've said it on this program so many times in so many different ways. But imagine if when we got locked down, if you had thought about, what is going to be really important going forward in a lockdown? Now, most of us thought it was only going to be 2 or 3 weeks. That's what we were told, right? But Netflix, Zoom, those are stocks that went up thousands of percent. But I'm here to tell you, I never thought about, I better invest in Zoom when this happened. I just started using more Zoom, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, 1,700% increase in their stock prices. I missed it. But that was because I wasn't looking for the opportunity in that area. So as business owners, as professionals, we need to look at challenge differently. We need to look at challenge as an opportunity and identify where are those opportunities going to come from this. And that's how you get ahead of the curve. That's how you discover things. And that's, by the way, that's how your team, if you collaborate with them, how your team comes up with ideas. And had I collaborated, maybe somebody would say, hey, think about this. I would have done it. But we all struggle with the same thing at certain points in certain areas of our life. And so if you take that from this program today, that communication is so essential, and not just the willingness to communicate, but as Ike said, the actualization of it, actually communicating and doing it in a very effective and very efficient way, and making sure your messaging is clear. We've talked about messaging almost every episode. What is your messaging to your clients? What is your messaging to your team? And if your messaging is right and it gets out there, it can have a super positive effect in your business. So, I want to ask you one last thing. So we've covered a lot. How can people reach out to you? Because I'm sure people might have questions. They own businesses. Maybe they're looking for a carrier. Maybe they're just looking for advice. Maybe they have an agency and say, hey, you're doing it. We're struggling. Maybe you can reach out. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out through email, ds@cliselect.com, or phone number 480-288-5900.
Okay, can you repeat that again?
Sure, ds@cliselect.com, and then 480-288-5900.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll have that posted up on the podcast slides as well. Any final words, Dawnyel, for our listeners? Something you'd like to leave people with? That golden nugget, that gem that you just think is important.
Well, last year was Pivot with Purpose and Positivity. I felt like I couldn't repeat last year. I didn't want to, as far as the motto goes. I wanted something new. So this year I coined it Persevere with Purpose and Positivity. And I think it is that you end up changing a lot. It's good to pivot, but you need to pivot in good ways, and you need to persevere through stuff, even if it isn't, back to the normal. And it's okay that it's, not okay. You just need to, like we talked about, look at the positive sides of it and make sure you have purpose and focus with going forward with what you're doing. And it's okay that it's hard. And it's okay to have conversations with somebody and say it's hard, but don't get stuck in that, and make sure you're moving through it and getting out of it if you're getting stuck in it.
Great. Excellent advice to our listeners. And Ike, any final thoughts from you, my friend?
No, I think we've covered a lot of interesting detail today, and as always, a lot of what happens with a business and its owners and the people who work at that business comes down to leadership. Is there somebody who is willing to make the change? Is there somebody who can control their own ego about how they've always done things? Are we willing to be humble enough to listen? Are we willing to take team input? Are we willing to look around outside our box, outside our office, away from our desk for help? And how are we reaching out to others to get through this thing together? And that has been part of the common thread of many of our conversations and those who have succeeded or survived to this point. So I think that Dawnyel brought and her story supports many of those ideas. So thanks for being with us today and sharing some of the detail about how you did it and what you're continuing to do.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you again and again for being our guest today, because it's always great to hear other stories that people that pivoted, and we were just getting ready to launch a series of leadership summits, and it was about 3 days before the shutdown, and they were in Phoenix, Chicago, Dallas, Philadelphia, and LA over a 5-month period. And I had speakers coming from all over the country, and it was all set, and it was going to be an amazing event, live event. Well, guess what? That didn't happen. So we pivoted and moved in a different direction. But it took communication. It took a plan. It took strategy. It took being willing to collaborate and to listen. So all those leadership things that we talk about. But again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Dawnyel. And you have an amazing story. And I'm sure if people want to know more, they can reach out to you directly. Ike, thank you as always, my friend, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be on these calls and interview our guest. And for everybody out there listening, I just want to thank you again for your support over the past several months for this program. I've had amazing comments from people about information that was shared, connections that were made. And we hope that as we continue this journey through 2021, that your business continues to grow and you continue to thrive, and business in the new normal will be a really positive, good thing for you. And so with that, I'm going to say again, thank you to our guest, Dawnyel Smink from Canyonlands Insurance, Ike Devji from Arizona Wealth Management, and he's in Scottsdale here, and Dawnyel's in Tempe, and I'm Joseph Rosales, Arizona. Sorry, and thank you.
Wealth Law.
Arizona Wealth Law. Thank you. And by the way, they can go to Business in the New Normal, our LinkedIn group and our Facebook group, and you can find these recordings there, as well as Business in the New Normal on YouTube. You can see a lot of great information that Ike produces pretty much every week. He shares articles from not just that he writes, but what other professionals are writing around the industry relative to thriving in this new environment. So that's it for the moment. But thank you again for joining Business in the New Normal. I'm Joseph Rosales, and really appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.